Okay, starting again. Hi, everyone. My name is Donato Cabrera, and welcome to this week's Music Wise. I'm so excited to welcome this week's guest. But before we begin, I wanted to plug this wonderful new program we're starting at the Las Vegas Philharmonic called Behind the Stand. It's a new membership program on Patreon. So look for announcements starting today. All right. This week's guest has been such an inspiration for me for so many years. We'll talk about how we first met and how we started working together, and the musical friendship we've developed over the years. So help me welcome Oliver Herbert. Hi, Oliver.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Looking forward to this. Yeah.
Oliver, I like all of us, we've had our sort of moment of reckoning over these last few months, and it's really been inspiring to see how all of us have responded to still wanting to still needing to connect, but not having our typical way of connecting and finding new pathways. And I'd love to just see what your thoughts on it have been, and what your experiences were leading into this, and what you've come up with maybe in these last few months.
Yeah, well, that's certainly. I think we were all kind of immediately faced with this situation where we're asking ourselves really, I think, really important questions, like how do we share our art form in a meaningful way, in a way that actually kind of is inspiring in the moment and feels direct, without being able to be in the same room with an audience. And so I think I've seen this kind of outpouring of creativity from so many people. I think different people go about it different ways, and in a way it's been a really interesting sort of time, because we kind of have this chance to explore a lot of things that we might not normally get the chance to. I don't know if you agree, but I mean, I've certainly been learning a lot of new skills. Of course, we all have to hop on board with technology, and yeah. But for me, the real question is, beyond live streaming a concert, how can we present music in a way that really speaks well through the medium of technology? For me, the magic thing about music performance is that it's all about the moment and the atmosphere, like sharing that with each other, between the performers, but also, of course, with the audience. And the audience informs so much, and we get so much of our energy and inspiration from them being in the room. And so, yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about, okay, so if I want to, record music or things, how can I present this in a way that sort of makes the audience feel like they're experiencing something in the moment, even though it's through a screen. So for me, I've been very interested in some like visual arts stuff, and animations, and yeah, I mean, lately I've been working on some more ambitious things that I'll probably be able to share, in the coming weeks and months. But it's been an interesting time. I don't know what you think about it. But
I absolutely agree, because I think what we've all discovered is that to create a moment on film basically is what we're doing. Even though we're using more modern technology, it's still a visual media that we're using now, rather than a live performance space, a three-dimensional oral experience that's, like you said, in the moment, where you're experiencing everyone's energy in the room, the audience and the performers, and that creates something that is unique to that moment. It can't be recreated anywhere else, as we all know. So, however, we all know that when we go see a movie or we see something on YouTube or something by ourselves just visually online, you can still create an indelible image. It has to be more than just what we're used to creating. In other words, we have to somehow simulate that live experience through the visual information that we have at our disposal.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway for me is that it's not so much about, it's not so much a matter of trying to translate what we normally do through the technology, but more, for me at least, seeing this as another way, and not a replaceable way, but something that's, there's a lot of opportunity in its fundamental differences, like presenting something with our technology. We have a lot of tools and things to explore with that, and we see people doing this, and I think it's going to be remarkable what people will be sharing, and I mean have already shared. But yeah, for me, I think the big takeaway is that it's its own thing. It's not so much that we need to adapt and find a way to fit a live performance through the online medium, but more, okay, let's develop this other medium. And I think, and I hope that after, we are sort of on the other side of this, whatever that looks like, that these things will actually coexist in a more harmonious way, and one that actually really helps the art form, and gets people interested in the live concerts and vice versa. So hopefully it can just be something, all of this can be for the best. That's my hope for this time.
I am equally as optimistic about that. I think that this sense of collaboration between visual artists and cinematographers, directors, with our art form, it has always been there. Look at Fantasia, these Fantasia. I mean, that's a great example we can look back on and use that as in a way as an example how we can go forward into creating something wholly new and unique that is not, it doesn't replace, it won't replace what we do, but it's an added, just a supplemental, almost an exploration of a collaboration, a symbiosis that's always been there. There'll just be more of it, and it'll be wonderful new things created. So I'm equally optimistic. During the earlier part of the few months we've been spending at home, you released an album speaking about using old language. You released an album.
Yeah, well, that was a very I'm just so excited about that project, and it was such a in a way a funny time to release it, but at the same time, this was a project that really, you speak about collaboration, and this project really exists in the spirit of collaboration, and I was able to do it and pull it off only because of that fact. I didn't have a label. I didn't have, I kind of just created it all from scratch with friends and family, and it ended up kind of evolving into something that, in a way, that freedom to do basically whatever I want, to present it in the exact way I want, it kind of led the project into a place that I think it wouldn't have been able to arrive otherwise, in a way. So, to give an example, in speaking of the visual stuff, I met a really wonderful filmmaker named David Hall, who lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And we happened to meet because he is an amateur cellist, and he reached out to me on Instagram wondering if he could have cello lessons, and I said, oh, of course, we could definitely, I'd be happy to meet with you and whatever. And then the thought occurred to me that, instead of I'm happy, like so happy to meet with people and help them and with the cello stuff, that actually instead of paying me, we could work together on a video project. And so that kind of started along, that was before I even knew about the album. And so that ended up becoming a really fundamental part of the whole presentation of it. And also the things like the album cover, the visual artist Jung Yi, who's my stepmother, she agreed to make this beautiful piece of art for me. And having the freedom to present the cover without any text, but as a piece of art which has the goal, at least the goal was that it would really invite people in, this idea of anyway, I have a lot to say about it, but it's just, I think my point is that considering the position that we're in now, I'm realizing that, my decision to go about doing this project by myself and to try to make that happen and explore, every creative opportunity that I had with it, that's kind of what we have to do now too. So it's funny because when I ended up releasing it, felt like, wow, this was actually kind of set a precedent for the kind of work that I really want to continue doing. So it was sort of a interesting coincidence in that way.
We're all learning so many things and using these new processes, these new technological, what might be new to us, incorporating them and finding out, wow, this is really, maybe this is what has been what I've wanted to say all along, and now I'm discovering it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit. I'd like to know the whole concept behind the album is a really wonderful sort of a gesamtkunstwerk of, you're using the visual image of the cover, the program itself. It tells this wonderful message. Can you talk a little bit why you chose the music you chose and how they all fit together into a larger concept?
Yeah, so the title of the album is Frame of Mind, and the two composers that I chose for this are Gabriel Fauré and Leos Janáček. And the basic idea is that, the original inspiration, especially with for both composers, but particularly with the Fauré sonatas, is that I felt when I got introduced to this music myself and started to work on it, I've just felt like the world that this music exists in is just so unique. And the music of Fauré, I always feel like playing it or listening to it, you're taking a little visit to a distant planet, like its own world, and you go and it's like an all-encompassing sensational experience. And then when you're done, you just come back to reality. But this idea that the music, to me, really takes you on a journey. And beyond that, the kind of I wanted to frame the project really around the idea of how can I inspire people to listen to the music in the way that I feel like, how can I lead the audience? And to me, that comes from inspiring a curiosity and this feeling of taking a look inward. It's not a project that kind of projects out, like this is what it is. It's actually meant to do the opposite, because I feel like this music, if you're willing to kind of give yourself into it, it just takes you on such an amazing journey. And it's very, speaking of visual, I find it has this kind of transformational aspect where the music is constantly shifting and one thing is turning into another. And it's very special music to me. And so I wanted to kind of, in all ways, present it in a way that I felt sort of trying to do justice to it, and trying to really introduce people to this very special world and sort of like frame of mind of listening.
I think the other interesting interesting aspect of this is that both composers on paper, you may say, oh, Janacek and Fauré, what's the connection? But really, they're so iconoclastic. In other words, when you hear the line of composers, say, that preceded Janacek in Czechoslovakia, you hear, of course, Dvorak, and you think of Smetana and Fibich, and you know, these very lyrical, tuneful composers. And then Janacek comes, and it's so totally different, yet very indicative of of his surroundings. Same thing with Fauré. Fauré, you may think of French composers that preceded Berlioz and Meyerbeer, and Fauré comes along, and he has, again, this totally iconoclastic sound world that is very, for lack of a better term, French, but it is Fauré. And it's his own, they inhabit their own universes that are seemingly unrelatable to people that have preceded them and the people that followed them.
Yes, and I'm so happy you mentioned that, because yes, I completely agree. And I just think that they're both, first of all, they're both geniuses, but they're both, I mean, Janacek in particular, I would say kind of disruptive in a way, because they, and in Fauré in the late music, so inventive, so unique, ahead of its time. I mean, well, I would say actually kind of timeless, because, you know, and the interesting thing, I always, with Fauré, you know, people think this is a funny comparison, but I actually always really feel something, I feel kind of the same thing that I feel to Fauré that I feel to Beethoven. And the reason I say that is because they're very, the form and the fundamental aspects of the music are actually very grounded. You know, they're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but somehow everything they do with something as simple as like a little scale, the most basic elements of music that we hear all the time, they can transform these things into expressing, you know, everything between the earth and the sky. It's really like totally remarkable to me. And the other interesting thing is that they were both, you know, both Beethoven and Fauré lost their hearing. And for me, with this music and my album, and with the music of Janacek, I really feel like it's a mental experience. It's music that I imagine Fauré, you know, he would take these summers and leave the city and go compose. And funnily enough, actually, when he wrote the first sonata, it was right around the time of the last century's pandemic, believe it or not, which was another interesting coincidence when I released this album. But I just really imagine that feeling of that isolation, and Janacek being such a unique figure. I mean, he started composing really late. I think he wasn't like very embraced during his time, at least not the majority of his work. But these are two really unique individuals with something totally individual to express. And yeah, so programmatically, the idea was that, you know, these two late Fauré sonatas, and what could complement and exist in the middle. And I found that this Janacek piece that I've also loved for a long time really sort of, I don't know, fit that bridge. Yeah.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Tell us a little bit about, you met with this amateur cellist who's a filmmaker. And does that have anything to do with this album trailer that was created?
So he was the one who ended up creating the album trailer. So that's his work, and yeah. So he's really wonderful. Actually, his sort of artistic name is Lone Cricket, and he produces a lot of really high quality work for, you know, independent people that work with him, or his own work as well, and beautiful sort of documentary style work as well. But the thing that I love about David's work is that he is able, that transformational aspect that I described to you, somehow the way that he films but also edits the material he works with is very artistic, and it's like he's able to create this other dimension and other world that I was really kind of picturing in my head. And yeah, the album trailer in a way is probably, it's very, you know, it's a trailer, so it's meant to kind of grab your attention. And so maybe not all of the music to me would be so, maybe the depictions would be different, but the basic idea and sort of like what you're seeing as you listen was very much as like what I was imagining in terms of what it's like to really immerse yourself in this music and listen to it. So I was I'm so grateful that I got, you know, circumstances allowed us to meet, because he just ended up, I think, adding something really special to the project. Yeah.
Well, let's watch it. You know, it is what we've been talking about, what you've been talking about how visual artists can create a whole separate world that you may not have even known to exist. I feel that when I watch that video. I feel that his take on the music through the images that were inspiring to him is something that is totally new and a different, almost like a different way of expressing both of these art forms together.
Yes. Yeah, and that's kind of what I found particularly inspiring during this time. I mean, I've done my own little experiments with things, and also, you know, I've been taking a lot of photos and, you know, gathering some films, and I got a camera here that I'm, you know, starting to work with. And I think the thing is, like, the other funny thing about this time for musicians is we have these ambitions and these impulses and ideas that we want to do, but the actual, you know, these are art forms in themselves too. And so that idea of collaboration and being able to facilitate something where you're really meeting somebody else, you know, at the same level, that I think that's really, when we get those opportunities, it's so wonderful. You know, I always feel so grateful when I get to work with another artist who does something different, but really, really well, because it always, I think, bears like more interesting results, and yeah, introduces other dimensions that maybe we weren't thinking of.
Well, speaking of collaboration, tell us a bit about your pianist, your partner on this recording.
Yes, yeah. Well, Xiaohui, she's an amazing artist herself, and I've known her for about I think around 6 years at this point. We met when I was 17 years old at the Ravinia Festival, and we were both students at the Staines Music Institute, which is a chamber music institute at Ravinia. And I remember so clearly hearing her play a Schubert sonata there, and something about the way that, you know, great pianists, I feel like they have this element in their touch where the sound can almost, you know, this luminance and this really special qualities that they can create with the sound.
I totally agree with you. When you hear pianists that can create the illusion that the piano's sound doesn't decay, that it somehow is legato and singing, that is one of the greatest magical moments in music making, is when the pianist can create that.
Yeah, and so I was so inspired by her playing and this quality that she brings, and yeah, I mean, she's wonderful. She really, everything that she approaches is just with the utmost sincerity, so much care for all the notes, and always with this goal, which I always try to as well, is like making something really special, you know. And so we met there, but we didn't. We played together for the first time, I think, the following year when we went on a little chamber music tour, and we actually played the Fauré C minor piano quartet together. And so that was when I first heard her play Fauré. And the thing about Fauré's music, the textures in the piano, it's a lot of notes. I mean, if you on my album, and in particular the second sonata of Fauré, really a lot of notes in the piano, but the textures and the colors that she brings out, and also the transparency, to where just because there's a lot of notes fluttering around, you hear it in this sort of spatial, three-dimensional way. It's not like a block of sound that's overwhelming you. And as a cellist, playing with a pianist like that, being able to weave in my line or complement, or, you know, it's like feels like almost like this musical orb that we're always shifting depending on what the music needs in the moment. So that after playing that Fauré chamber music piece with her, it was immediately on my mind, like, this is the person I want to play these Fauré sonatas with. And then a few years later, we started kind of teaming up to play recital programs, and we introduced these Fauré. We actually did a Fauré and Beethoven program where we started the program with the Beethoven first sonata and ended it with the Beethoven last sonata, and then had the two Fauré sonatas in the middle.
That's a big concert.
Yeah, it was big, but it's like when you have a presenter that wants 2 hours worth of music, it's like, okay, well, you asked for it. So that was so much fun to do that. Yeah, and then we finally arrived at the, you know, we both felt that recording something, it was a new experience for both of us, and to try to do an album, it's the kind of thing where it's like you're never going to be ready, or, you know, you're always going to feel, oh, you know, our interpretation could be more mature, it could be this or this or this, but at a certain point, I think you just have to do things because, you know, otherwise you won't learn. And so we certainly, I think, grew a lot as a duo in the process of doing the recording. I don't know if you have that experience where it's just, oh, I remember we were talking about a certain piece where, I think, what was it, Brahms 3, right? Where it's like you can always have these things where you feel, oh, am I ready? Or this piece, you revere it so much that you almost, you know, who am I to do this in the face of the great art? But then through the process of actually making that commitment, you become what you want to be, essentially. I remember talking about that.
We talked about it because the double concerto that we performed together was on the concert that I was also going to conduct, the Third Symphony of Brahms, and I had waited for probably too long. For those reasons, I had not conducted. That was the last of the Brahms symphonies that I hadn't conducted, and so. And you're absolutely right. In the in the discovery and finally wanting to put my hat into the ring and say, okay, I'm going to conduct this. Who knows what it's going to be, but I'm going to try my best. In that process of really challenging myself, I was able to grow so much more than I had given myself credit for. So you're absolutely right. You know, sometimes you need to dive in, and you're going to swim, but it may not be the most beautiful stroke in the world, but you're swimming, and you have to swim.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, you know, we always tend to underestimate ourselves, and I really think that that anything is possible, and it's really a matter of caring. You know, really, like, what is it that you really what is it that you really want? And I think that if your priorities are in line with the art and the music, I mean, I think it guides you, you know, in a way. It's, you can't really do wrong. And I think that sometimes people have more power than they think to just decide, to make the decision, the commitment. I'm going to do this because I really care about it. And I think the world would be a better place if somebody did this idea. So I'm going to just do it. And if everybody did that, I think, you know, it'd be amazing what we would see.
You know, I was just thinking of that concert that we did together that included the double concerto and the Symphony No. 3, and so many things came together that I hadn't anticipated. We'll move on, but I will have to say that same week, which I didn't know was going to happen at all, and I probably wouldn't have programmed Brahms Symphony No. 3 if I had known, Maestro Blomstedt was conducting the very same symphony with the San Francisco Symphony. And the week prior, our dear friend Alistair Neal had conducted it with the Marin Symphony.
Yes.
And so I went to see Alistair conduct a masterful performance of it the week prior. I went to at least 2 or 3 of the rehearsals with the incredible Herbert Blomstedt rehearsing and telling stories and inspiring our friends in the San Francisco Symphony to play this piece in such a beautiful way. And it was as if it was meant to be, no matter how scared I was to conduct it myself, that it was meant to be that I was going to do it then as well.
Yes. Yeah, that was such a amazing coincidence that week. It's Brahms 3 week in the area.
Tell us about, you know, to have a sense of exploration, a sense of the responsibility that artists must have in order to express themselves. We often are so lucky to have teachers that give us the tools, the philosophical tools, the technical tools, the tools required to be curious. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about maybe perhaps those teachers, and they don't necessarily even have to be teachers of your instrument. They can be other people in our art form that are inspiring in that way. Tell us about those people in your life that have given those tools to you.
Yeah, well, I feel so fortunate to have had the influences and mentors that I've had. And I think the thing is that each person, I feel like I've learned so much from their own experience, and they've offered such a unique take I mean, the people that immediately come to mind are, of course, my cello teachers, people like Peter Wiley at Curtis and Carter Bray at Curtis, and then also Clive Greensmith at the Colburn School. These were all cellists that really, in one way or another, were all about kind of transcending. I would say they were great musicians who happened to play the cello, because they all were about something beyond whatever it meant to play the instrument. And that kind of was reflected in very different ways for each person. And that was based on their own personality and everything like that. But I found that so inspiring. And also studying at Curtis, I got to meet so many other wonderful instrumentalists that weren't cellists, people like Pam Frank, who was one of my great inspirations while I was studying there. And
well, I have to share something. I think it was you were performing the Elgar cello concerto the year prior with the Marin Symphony, season prior, and it was at the time that Peter Serkin passed away. And you and I were sharing a ride. I had gone to see that concert that you were performing with the Marin Symphony, and I was lucky enough to be invited to the dinner afterwards with you and Alistair and Lowell. And what was so wonderful about that was that you shared with me your experiences that you had with chamber music coaching with Pam Frank, and the recording that you had been obsessed over with her performing the Brahms violin sonata, recording the Brahms violin sonatas with Peter Serkin. And it later that day, of course, I went back home and I remember it being released, but I don't remember really listening to it. And boy, you're absolutely right. What an incredibly searching artist.
Yes.
They both are. And I can only imagine how inspiring it was to have someone around like all of the people you mentioned, but particularly Pam Frank, and in her take on music, because she wasn't a cellist, because
yes, yeah, and I had so much fun at Curtis because I was very, she was so nice to me and let me. I would go to all of her violin studio classes and listen, and that was so nice to me too, to kind of, I think what we do is it's all about the music, and to actually be in an environment where that people aren't talking about your instrument. It's actually kind of a nice way to step out of that mindset. And because sometimes, all of our instruments have personalities and traditions and everything, and within the repertoire too, ways that we're used to hearing it. And so I find playing for a pianist or a violinist, or certainly conductors and, wind players, that's actually that's where I learned so much, because it makes me question or recognize things that maybe I was kind of, I was blinded by my cellist eyes. And and another person who of course is a big figure for both of us is MTT, and just growing up around him and the symphony. And he's such a big source of inspiration. And I feel like beyond everything, MTT kind of speaks for himself and everything that he does and creates for artists and the art world. But I feel also like, that idea that we learn from people in terms of who they are as musicians, but we also learn a lot by their kind of mentality and their vision. And he's somebody who I feel like his vision is so unbounded. And whenever I'm with him and discussing art or music with him, I always walk away sort of questioning, oh, maybe there's actually a way to take this further, or maybe there's another way to frame this. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, but those kinds of lessons, I think for me at this point, are maybe the most valuable, where it's really about looking at the place of art in the world, and on thinking on a very broad scale, and these people who have experience like MTT's experience, and I just feel like there's so much to learn. And I always feel so grateful for any chance I get to have conversation with him, because I walk away just so inspired.
I feel that absolutely the same way. And in fact, now that we've been celebrating over the spring and into the summer, celebrating his 25 amazing years with the San Francisco Symphony, I have been almost not being able to find the words of how impactful he was, of course, not only to this community and to this orchestra and to the institution and arts and cultural institutions, the Bay Area, but to me personally, because like you said, every conversation that one is a part of with him, whether it's just the two of you or with a group of people, he is the provocateur. He is the person who is continually looking from without, being able to take whatever the conversation is about. He can take the longer lens and not, and in a very inspiring way, have all of the people involved in the conversation bring you out to that lens, that vantage point, and see other aspects. And he has done that since the very first time I met him, which was ironically virtually.
Oh, wow.
And it's so funny, I haven't talked about this, but when I was a student at Manhattan School of Music, the big thing was Internet 2, which is I think basically still around in some form or another. But at the time, the Manhattan School of Music was one of the nodes, was one of the places where Internet 2 was happening. So was Columbia University, and New World Symphony, and I think one of the universities in Miami was also one of the places where Internet 2 could actually happen. And so he coached me with me conducting the Manhattan School of Music Orchestra in Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. And we were Columbia University, and he was in Miami, and of course this was in 2002, so you can imagine, all the latency issues were basically happening at the time. But from the very first question he asked me, this was the first time I ever met him, I knew that I needed, it showed me that I needed to be asking those questions of myself all the time, and looking beyond just the what, where, and how. He talks about this. He said, people usually get, learn all of those things, the easy stuff, when the piece was written, and tell us a little bit about the composer, and et cetera, et cetera. But the question where artists often finish is, why are you doing this piece? And if you can answer that, the big question is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
He said that before, and I will, if there's one thing that is sort of a guiding principle, it's those words. What are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And so he's such a, inspiring person. And I really was looking forward to hearing Mahler 8 in San Francisco to close the season. And I think everybody has realized, oh, wow, what a profound, we all knew how much of a profound impact he's made, but it's really, I think, even more apparent at a time like this, and a change of, the end of the 25 years with the symphony and all of that. And I also feel like, going back to the idea of education, I feel like another facet of education that's always been really important and something that I'm very grateful for is actually the education of experience, and people being willing to give a chance to somebody to do something that might be, they have to climb a level to get there, but that was the only way that they could. And identifying people that, mentors that are able to identify, what is the right way to challenge this person at the right time. And I'm also thinking about our time in the youth orchestra, getting, when I was playing the youth orchestra and you were conducting, that opportunity that I got to do the Block Shlomo with you, that was a big moment for me, because it was, I think I had, some talent, and I was playing, and I loved music, but playing a concerto in Davies Symphony Hall, that's just another level. And so these opportunities, education through opportunity, I think, is also a big thing, and something that I try not to take for granted. And because there's, I've been so fortunate to get these opportunities, also to work with MTT this past season, and the past 2 seasons, but especially, with real subscription concert. That was such a gift of an opportunity. And
what was sorry to interrupt, but my question is, time had passed between Bloch, Shlomo, and Haydn's Cello Concerto Number 2. Yeah, it was the second.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, there were different circumstances. One was with the youth orchestra and myself, and the other one was with San Francisco Symphony and Michael Tilson Thomas. But you're on that stage that you've known your entire life in one way or another.
Yeah.
And what was it like coming back as a soloist on that stage all those years later?
Well, I think that it felt in a way like a totally new experience, but at the same time so familiar. And I think playing the block, and also just the simple fact, whenever I talk about the San Francisco Symphony Youth Orchestra, I always emphasize the idea, like how great it is for young players like myself, just the sheer fact of rehearsing on that stage every week. That is such a gift. And I feel like a very unique thing about the San Francisco Symphony Youth Orchestra, that we all get to meet and actually rehearse on the stage. And there's some kind of, I think there's a subconscious sort of, like you get in gear with the idea that I could belong on a stage like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's really powerful stuff, because, I can't help but think that really prepared me for this year in a lot of ways, because it sort of informed my own inner feeling, like, yes, I can do this. I can belong on a stage like this. I think it's really important to mention that. I mean, the youth orchestra is just so, all of the alums and we're so grateful for all of the opportunity that it gave us.
Tell us a little bit about this project of Dvorak at Home.
Oh yeah, that was just a little video that I made, and that, so as I mentioned, I've been doing some experiments. This was like early in the lockdown, and a lot of experiments that are sort of testing out different aspects of things that I want to develop maybe throughout this year in a more serious way. And one of those things was actually sort of figuring out how I can do multi-track recording,
Mm-hmm.
and to create arrangements or even my own compositions or things that I can actually record all the parts and superimpose them. And this, melody, Going Home by Dvorak, I've always loved it. So I thought, this would be a nice chance to just try that out for the first time, to this layering of recording all the parts and trying to layer it. And it's the favorite piece of my grandmother, who I think is watching this live stream, maybe.
I'm sure she is.
I always think of her when I play that piece. So it was kind of an experiment in a way, because now that I was able to do that, now I can think, okay, what maybe I can organize something a little bit more on a larger scale. And because all of these things, whether it be video editing or audio things, we need to educate ourselves. So I've kind of been doing it by sort of making building blocks of little projects that help me get to the goal that I want to be in, maybe by the end of the year. Yeah.
That's great. So let's watch it. Really, it's so beautiful. Recording yourself for the first time and layering voice upon voice upon voice is so much harder than you think, right?
Yeah. It is, and I think also figuring out, okay, even the simple thing, at least for me, and I feel like most musicians, downloading a software on your computer to even do the things, and that's even that, I think, is a big step, or at least was for me, to do these things for the first time. And but I think the idea is that it can grow exponentially over time, the skills that we develop with these tech things, and so now I'm also, it's also tricky because at a certain point you want to have nice equipment too. So at a certain point in all of this, I decided, okay, I'm gonna make the investment and get a really nice camera. And so now I'm starting to work with that, and I think that's really gonna help me go even further.
I'm curious, what camera did you decide to purchase?
Well, I got a secondhand camera from Todd Rosenberg, who's
our friend, yes,
photographer and friend of the music world. And I asked him for advice. I said, I'm thinking about getting a camera off of like eBay or whatever, and used, and what do you think of this? And is there anything I should look out for getting something secondhand? Because I just have no idea about any of that. And he was like, oh, well, actually, I have some things I don't use anymore, and maybe we could arrange something. So it's kind of another circumstantial thing. So I ended up with a very nice camera, and it's great because if a festival or presenter, needs material or some small thing like, would you be a part of this or do this? I feel confident that I can actually offer something of high quality. Mm-hmm. Whereas before I was feeling, it's you want the quality to be at the level of what you're trying to give musically. And so I think sometimes you have to make the investment. And during a time like this, it's a little difficult, but I think it's really important, or at least for me, I felt, I really want to try to up the quality as much as I can over the next months.
So you've done a couple of other really wonderful sort of, speaking of experiments, these wonderful videos that you've aptly called Animation Number 1 and Animation Number 2. What was the inspiration behind these animations? Because they're really, really brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I've had this kind of interest in stop motion animation for a long time, but I never actually did it myself. And I mean, the idea, for anybody who doesn't know, the idea of stop motion animation is that it's actually just a collection of individual pictures, and then playing them in rapid succession, you can create you can make things move, you can, all that stuff. And so, I've always found that art form very endearing and very special. And
well, it's incredibly time consuming as well. I mean, just to think about the great masters of stop animation, Wallace and Gromit, and
yes,
what they do is just, I just can't imagine the time involved of making.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of time, and yeah. So basically, the first one that I ever did, it was such a random sort of. You know how sometimes ideas will just come to you in the most. You never know when they're going to come, but an idea is just arrives. And so one morning I was waking up and taking a shower or whatever, getting ready, and I had this idea of, I should, I have this little stuffed animal in my house, and I thought, I should try to make some video out of it. And then 6 hours later, I made this fun kind of little video, and the idea is that, it's what happens when I leave my apartment and my cello is out on the couch, and I leave to go get groceries, and what happens when I'm gone. And then so So it was just sort of a spur of the moment kind of little inspiration, and I had a lot of fun with it. I ended up actually then doing some multi-track recording to make a little soundtrack for the animation, and yeah, so it was sort of like the first seedling of my animation interest, and then since then I did another one, and then now I'm working on some actually with the nicer camera that are more ambitious for actually my album's tracks. So yeah, so it's sort of this interest that's developing in its own interesting ways. Something I didn't think I would be doing, but I find a lot of joy in the process of doing it. So
well, let's see what happens when you leave your apartment.
So that's that. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, does the animal, does the stuffed animal have a name?
Yes, its name is Utori.
Otori.
Ootori.
He's very ambitious. Now, did he give up at the end, or was he just sort of like just testing the waters?
Oh well, he just if I'm lucky, because if I hadn't turned on the camera, I never would have known. He left everything in the same position. So no, it's just a fun little thing, and yeah, I've been trying to challenge myself that especially this was at the point where everything was canceled, so nothing was happening. So I had all this time on my hands, and so I was trying to challenge myself. Oh, if I have an idea or something, this is the time to do it, because I never would have sat down and done that otherwise. And the other one that I did was sort of a similar situation, but kind of took the multi-track thing and the animation aspect to like another level, but the same kind of random creative impulse that I got, because I went to the grocery store and I bought some corn flour to make something specific at home, but then once I got back, I realized, oh gosh, this is the wrong kind of flour. So I had this big bag of flour and I didn't know what to do. I had nothing to do with it. And so I had this idea. I said, oh, well, if I mix it with water, it becomes this sort of like malleable clay-like thing. So I thought I would do sort of like a claymation, but with corn flour and water. And anyway, so and then the multi-track aspect, I took a real piece, which is the Snow is Dancing by Claude Debussy. It's part of his Children's Corner suite, which is a solo piano work. And I decided to make an arrangement for cello. So like what would happen if I made an arrangement of a piece which is very pianistic and sort of pointillistic in a way. And so that was the other challenge, and then it kind of ended up being what it was. And it was another like fun little project. But yeah, as you mentioned, these things are really time consuming, and I think that's actually what makes stop motion very special, is because nowadays everything is immediate and easy, and this is something where there's no shortcut, and yet it has this real life quality that maybe another kind of animation, like just graphic animation, doesn't have in a way. And it's a fun way to also play around with your environment. And yeah, so I enjoy it, but it's time consuming. I mean, these ones that I'm working on now for the foray, you know, it's like, I also got, in speaking of software, I got a more advanced software for the stop motion. These other ones I did on my phone. And this software, you know, it's like, I think I'm doing 24 pictures per second of video. And so it's really a lot, but the detail you can get is super cool. So yeah.
So let's watch this. Now, the second one though was you still used with an iPhone, yeah?
Yeah, this one I did with my iPad. And there's a great app for anybody who's interested in just doing their own little stop motion stuff. It's called Stop Motion Studio. And that was the way. It's very easy. It's like super you know, intuitive, and you can make your own little videos with it. It's pretty fun. So if anybody has an iPhone or an iPad and they want to do it, you know, that's the app that I got started with. And now I'm working with a software called Dragon Frame, which is very professional. So there's also a learning curve with that. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's watch it.
Cool.
So beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Things you can do with flour and water.
Yeah, it's and a mirror. That was the other aspect. So it was a mess to clean up. Like flour and water all over the house. It was quite an ordeal. But yeah, it's been a, you know, I think after I had these sort of like creative impulses and bursts, and then I went through a phase of actually, I think when the COVID stuff really sunk in, then it was like this period of actually doing kind of nothing and just sort of a lot of inner work with myself. I'm sure a lot of this has been a very introspective time for a lot of us, but yeah, thinking back, because these were things I did sort of early on, it's interesting. I think almost it was like a way to, it's like almost a reaction to everything that was happening. It was like, I'm going to do the most time consuming thing possible. So it's like almost distracting me from like what's really going on. And then I kind of went through a phase of this sort of coming to terms with everything and really thinking, contextualizing everything. And now I'm starting again to, okay, like implement these things in a more, what's the right way of putting it? Like a more intentional way.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully I'll be able to have some more things to share before too long.
Well,
yeah.
Oliver, we're all waiting for the next thing. I know that everything that you will share will have integrity and an artistic point of view, and you always are honest with all of us. It's when your art is that way. It's honest music making, honest artistic expression. And over these years I feel so lucky to make music with you and to talk with you now about music and the art form as it stands now, as it will go into the future. I know that you'll be a strong voice. So thank you so much for joining us today on Music Wise. I've kept you a little longer than intended, but
oh no, thank you, Donato, and likewise. I mean, always it's been such a inspiring thing to know you and work with you. So thanks for. Nice to see you today. Hopefully we can meet up in person soon. And yeah, thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.